Hello and welcome to a video special from the MOSSAD Files. I'm Dan Raviv, co-author of books about the Middle East, and specifically Israeli strategy, intelligence, and diplomacy. My books co-authored with Yossi Melman. On the MOSSAD Files audio podcast, I'm proud to say we've spoken with so many guests, experts in Israel, in the United States, and in other countries about the many challenges facing Israel at this time. And we have a second visit now by Nimrod Novik. Welcome to you, Nimrod. You are perhaps best known to my audience as a longtime advisor to the late Prime Minister Shimon Peres. In fact, you have been involved with Israeli leadership and diplomacy for decades. You know the United States very well. You're also the Israel Fellow for IPF, Israel Policy Forum. And I know that you're also on the board, willing to say that I think there's a connection here. The Commanders for Israeli Security, I think I got that name right. I'm wondering what your take is. At this point, we're speaking Thursday evening, August 28th, and for more than a week, we've said that the Israeli government is on the edge of really going into the Gaza Strip full force to finish off Hamas, and certainly things have changed. There's a lot more pushing, pounding, and killing, frankly, in Gaza City and in other parts of the Gaza Strip, but it's as though the big decision hasn't been made. You know, maybe still there could be a deal for the hostages. So first, where do you think things stand as of now on that?
I think that like throughout the last 2 years and beyond, the one who calls the shots is obviously Netanyahu. And he's operating within certain constraints. He's loaded his coalition with very extreme elements who hold the key to his tenure. They have enough numbers to bring him down should they feel that their ambitions are not met. And their ambitions are spelled out in very clear terms, and they sound so absurd that people take them lightly, but they're not. They're serious. They don't want the war to end. They want to reach a situation where we reoccupy the entire Gaza Strip, set the stage for depopulating it, if you will, ethnic cleansing, and bring in Jewish settlements. That's their vision. It's not his, to the best of my knowledge. He's far more intelligent a person and responsible for that. But that's a pressure that he's been playing with. At the other end, there is the Trump administration, which I'm not sure how to characterize. It's zigging and zagging on the issue. I mean, you have pronunciations from the president. On the one hand, basically giving Netanyahu a free hand to resume the war more than once, after cessation of pauses and ceasefires, encouraging, accepting Netanyahu's judgment on resuming the war, which, as I said, stems from domestic politics. And a day later or two, he's astonished by the consequences. And suddenly he doesn't want to see reporters killed. And suddenly he doesn't want to see humanitarian disaster. And therefore, yesterday or the day before, he announced that in 2 weeks the war will be over.
Well, he said, frankly, Nimrod, I hate to interject, but, you know, it's a regular thing from Donald Trump that almost everything is put off for 2 weeks. But he certainly has said that he's in favor of ending the war. It just wasn't clear even here in Washington. Does he mean by pounding Hamas and the people of Gaza, or by rushing to a deal? He's got his envoy, Steve Witkoff, but frankly, Witkoff has been at the White House lately, not really focused on trying to make an Israel-Hamas deal.
Well, they did have a meeting on the subject last night at the White House. And interestingly, Jared Kushner, Tony Blair, and Ron Dermer attended, a big one on Gaza, where is it going? And they called it morning after. I have no idea what transpired. But the very fact that they devoted some time to it was encouraging. Look, the definition of end of war is far too loose for comfort. By the IDF, the war was over in January when Hamas military formations and governance were dismantled. What we have now is no Hamas strategic threat to Israel, no October 7th in the cards, but yeah, insurgency and continued terrorism. This will last, if we are there, this will last for decades. As we are there, as occupiers, hostility towards us is focused, and recruitment of younger and younger since kids to Hamas is going on under this situation.
Clearly, that's unstoppable. There's no alternative.
As long as we are there.
For Palestinians.
As long as we are there.
I hear you. As long as you're there, and part of the deal, at least that Hamas demands, to the extent that Hamas actually still has officials and negotiators, and they seem to be in Doha, Qatar, and they can get the ear of the government of Qatar and of Egypt. And Hamas says their demand is that the Israelis pull out totally, and then Hamas hints we're willing not to be the next government, etc. Let me bring up one other element that I think was really big. It made it on television all over the world, as we've seen, and that is the huge demonstrations in Israel. Right, on Sunday, just over a week ago, and again this week on Tuesday, in addition to the fact that roads were blocked and there were protests in many places, the big rallies in the streets, we saw it in Tel Aviv, 500,000, a million. One estimate said 1.5 million in a country of 10 million, certainly made it look like those members of the public want priority number one to be freeing the 50 hostages, only 20 believed to be alive, freeing the hostages, ending the war. It was clear what they want. So does that have impact? And you can answer on an international level, but I'm really wondering if it has an impact on Netanyahu in balancing his political forces.
Look, I almost feel uncomfortable because I'm not used to being a majority in my country. And this is a rare occasion where the overwhelming majority believes that prioritizing the hostages and ending the war is the way to go. It's been the case for months now. I'm surprised again with the massive demonstrations, which I'm happy to attend. The energy is amazing. And I believe it does have an effect. I'll give you an illustration. When the polls began to show months ago, a substantial majority prioritizing ending the war and bringing the hostage in order to bring the hostages, not buying the notion that military pressure produces hostages, but rather diplomacy does. Netanyahu got worried. And given that he is no longer accustomed to giving interview to Israeli journalists because they know what to ask, he is now, his shtick is that he is issuing clips. His spokesperson asks him questions and he answers. And he reacted to the polls. And he said the pollsters are skewing the question by saying hostages and ceasefire, end of war, but they are not saying Hamas stays. And if they say that under these two conditions there is the third, then results will be different. Several pollsters rose to the challenge and asked exactly that question and got the same results. That is to say that even if Hamas stays, people prioritize hostages, but I would submit to you that that's not the option on the table. The option on the table is end of war, hostages home, and a third party neither Hamas nor IDF running Gaza.
Well, I don't want to skip over the international impact of large protests in the streets. I heard from several Middle East experts here in Washington who are known for years to be supporters of Israel, but yes, they've increasingly become critics of Netanyahu. And they said the U.S. needs to remind Netanyahu that he doesn't have a majority of the public, that he seems to believe in his bubble that he can do these things. Most of the experts said they don't really expect Donald Trump to remind him, but I would say you never know. Donald Trump has a keen sense for when someone is kind of a political loser, right? He's starting to lose support. He's going to lose the next election, and Trump can be very blunt in ways like that. So it's not impossible. So to that sense, when you have powerful scenes on television, right, someone like Trump and other people, right, age-old supporters of Israel, even in Congress, may be getting to Netanyahu saying, well, I have one other, of course, Tom Friedman's column in the New York Times that says that Netanyahu policies in the Gaza war are turning Israel into a pariah, that the message might get through, Nimrod.
Yes, I certainly believe so. And that was what we targeted. You mentioned earlier that I belong to Commanders for Israel Security. And on behalf of the 600 members who are all top retired top leaders of the entire Israeli security and diplomatic system, we sent a letter to the president, which circulated widely in the administration and the media. But what I can tell you is that, exactly in line with your comment, that the fact that 600 retired Israeli generals and equivalents tell the president it's time to end the war. You did it in Lebanon, and we can continue dealing with residual Hezbollah remotely. The same can happen in Gaza. You have what it takes. Israelis like you, which augments your leverage. Time to end the war. And I heard from several administration officials that having such a powerful security validator coming from Israel was very useful in their conversations in Jerusalem.
The group of 600, as you say, who were leaders of the Mossad, the Shin Bet domestic security, the military, diplomacy and government like yourself. Okay, I got it. So you're not just lonely voices in the wind, and we don't know the outcome of the election that must be held in your country by October of next year. And usually a government doesn't wait until the last month. So what do you think is the outlook for that? And go ahead, you can name some names, right? Our viewers and listeners know Benny Gantz, the former chief of staff and briefly defense minister who joins Netanyahu and leaves Netanyahu. And this past week made another offer. He'd like to join a kind of national unity government for freeing the hostages, but it seemed that nobody was paying much attention to Gantz. What does this all add up to when Netanyahu might call an election?
It seems to me that our heterogeneous opposition is yet to get its act together. There are efforts. People sense, as you said, the potential for early elections. So we are beginning to see feelers going around. With Gantz, I believe it has to do with one trait, admirable, which is responsibility. And I think another trait, which is less so, is that he's a poor politician and he sees his numbers evaporating and he barely makes the threshold for the next elections. But nonetheless, the combined effect is that he's trying to do something right. I have no idea, even not only what might be the result of the next elections, but not even what will be the map of competing parties. Because most of us expect something fresh to emerge from the protest movement. A party that never ran before, people who never considered people who are doing so well in their academic and business and other and high tech, and suddenly realize that they have to serve the country just as they do in reserve duty in uniform in politics. So we may see something fresh. The only thing that I think I can say with some confidence is two. One, the next government is not going to be a bunch of peaceniks who are going to run to Ramallah to embrace Abu Mazen and sign a peace treaty overnight. Israel is not ripe for it in the wake of October 7th, and the Palestinians are not ripe for it in the wake of the two-year war in Gaza. But my assumption is that the lunatics, the messianic annexationists, are not going to be there. And therefore, a government, even if it is not pure bunch of peaceniks, will be a bunch that understands that annexation is the end of the Zionist vision, the end of the Zionist enterprise. With 7 million Palestinians and 7 million Jews, when we annex, it's over. And therefore, even though they're not ready, and I think the public is not ready to separate into a two-state solution anytime soon, reversing the trend towards an ever-bleeding one-state reality with tremendous friction between the two populations, with Palestinian youth radicalized as a result of Gaza and everything else, and Israeli settlers are more of a terrorist nature with the backwind from their leaders in government. When these people are out of government and out of coalition, I think we're going to see a balanced policy that drives a road, a long road, a careful one, security-based, that reduces the friction between the two peoples and keeps the door open for an eventual something more ambitious.
Well, I'm going to call that optimism. It is. You think there'll be some reasonable outcome to not only the election, but the inevitable battle over forming coalitions. And for those who say anyone but Bibi, as though Netanyahu has caused most of the problems, you don't seem to be there. You're no admirer of his, and you certainly despise and fear the results of the current coalition. But you've already mentioned that he's too intelligent to want to annex the West Bank and Gaza and lead to that problem. So you don't know the outcome of the election or the coalition, but it could be Bibi Netanyahu, but with a very different coalition. True?
I'll be surprised if he's the next prime minister. And I will not be surprised. I'm sorry, he cannot serve if he is not a prime minister. By law, he cannot be a minister. He can be prime minister, but not minister because of the indictments and the trial that he's facing on corruption.
Well, don't forget that trial could end one way or another, though there's no sign of that.
Not next year, and I doubt the year after. Okay. He and his lawyers, more than he, are very astute at dragging it out. But let's even take your assumption. Netanyahu, I've known Netanyahu since 1982. Almost like Biden, who inscribed the picture to him saying, I love you and I disagree with everything you stand for. I take the second half. I disagree with everything you stand for. I don't love him.
Sure,
but I respected him. I respected him.
You've been generally with the center left of Israeli politics.
That's right.
Including Shimon Peres when he was the Labor Party. All those names have changed. And of course, Netanyahu was a rising star and then the leader of the right-wing Likud party. But you've known him. You've had to deal with him. Prime ministers would speak in private with opposition leaders. So you're saying he's not a stupid ultra-Jewish nationalist who wants to expel all the Arabs or thinks he can.
No, I would say that on the spectrum between hardline ideologue and opportunist, he's closer to the opportunist. Right. Intelligent opportunist. And when you see his policies over the decades, you can see evidence of that. Zigging and zagging based on constraints rather than ideological drive.
And
No,
what about
I'm not anything
his
but Bibi.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not anything but Bibi. My problem is with the policy, not with the man.
Yeah.
And the same Bibi can behave very differently. Look, his previous coalitions, before his indictment and before the trial and its logical conclusion, which is time served in prison, before that dominated his agenda, he was very careful in structuring his coalition. He was always the center of the coalition. He had people to his left, people to his right, making sure that neither can drag him too far, which is clever for an opportunist.
And how about some points in his favor about the other military and strategic outcomes, even during this Gaza war, right? It starts with Israel being taken by surprise, October 7th, horrible deaths, kidnappings, but the victories over Hezbollah in Lebanon, the fall of the Assad government in Syria, and then when actual hostilities break out with Iran, again, I mean, Bibi at least gives the orders. He hears the Mossad and IDF and Air Force plan, and it sure did work. And then somebody drew in Donald Trump on the 9th day of the June war, to finally do something that we thought was impossible. The U.S. would send its B-2 bombers to use the bunker busters against the nuclear site. So, Netanyahu can really accomplish things.
I think it is unacceptable to put on him the responsibility for October 7th and not give him credit for those accomplishments. He is responsible for October 7th, and he deserves credit for the courage of decision in both vis-a-vis Hezbollah and vis-a-vis Iran. Syria is a derivative, but the two real serious decisions produced amazing results. I wish he had the freedom to make equally security-based decisions on Gaza. But there he's beholden to the lunatics who are security ignorant and ideologically driven.
Before we go, I'd like your overall assessment and feeling as to whether Israel of August 2025, and soon to be 2 years since October 7th, is clearly weaker, more divided, disheartened, back on its heels, or they're a mix of so many elements compared with before October of 2023, including that maybe Saudi Arabia was getting close to having proper relations with Israel and all sorts of hopeful signs. Is Israel a lot worse off right now?
It's a mixed bag. In terms of security, and I'm talking about proper security and perceived capabilities, Israel is far better off. Far better off. I'm just back from a very important regional consultation, discreet, and it was wall to wall that Israel is by far the strongest power from Tehran to Benghazi. There was a twist, a nasty twist to it, that given that fact, perceived fact, the policy that Israel is pursuing is hegemonious. Israel wants to shape the region to its likings, which, to the best of my contacts anywhere in the Israeli security establishment, this is not the case. We are overcompensating for October 7th. We are not taking risks we used to take. Positions were hardened, but we are not trying to shape the region. There is a missing link, and that is some mature adult, who will bring the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Turks, and us to the table to talk Syria, so we don't work at cross purposes when they are trying to steer Ashara, the President Ashara, in a direction of internal inclusiveness and external, and no friction abroad. whereas we still look at him as the old terrorist Giuliani, and we treat him like us, and we are at cross purposes, and there's nobody to bring us together to harmonize our legitimate security concerns with their billions that are trying to steer him in a constructive direction. But that's what happens when the mature adult is a juvenile. Pardon the expression.
There was a lot there, and you don't even have to confirm this. I'm only doing this for our viewers and listeners. There was a lot of reference there to Saudi Arabia without saying Saudi Arabia that wants a certain direction and outcome for Syria. And I think the juvenile might have been the president of my country. But back to you, Nimrod.
Bottom line, I think that, as I said, security-wise, we are far better off in terms of security proper and perceived, which is deterrence. People, I think, understand that better not mess with us. The question is, do we leverage that in order to bring the other leg on which we should walk? Not limp on one leg, but walk on the other, diplomacy. And this government is not doing it because of its composition and ideological underlining.
And just a few
to
words,
the public,
and just a few words about the people and the population and the economy and jobs and startup nation. And are people reporting for IDF duty? Are they leaving the country on suspiciously long vacations?
The internal situation is in a not in a healthy trajectory. Both the economy, the cost of the war, direct and indirect, we're beginning to feel the effect of bottom-up what's the word? When the world doesn't buy from you.
Well, boycotts and sanctions.
Boycott, sorry. Bottom-up boycotts, not necessarily governments, but institutions, financial institutions. We have a brain drain of high tech. There are offers now that people are willing to take that they did not previously. And the country is torn apart and is yearning for a conciliatory type leadership. I think there is a basic sense that the next elections will not resolve all our problems for sure, but we will witness again the internal quiet of arguing in a civil way that we briefly experienced with the government of change of Bennett and Lapid, bookmarked by two Netanyahu administrations. I think there is confidence that Israel will come back to its senses. And once we end the Gaza war, and once we change dynamics on the West Bank, I believe that regional dynamics and international dynamics are going to be on a different trajectory. I don't know how long it will take to remedy the damage that we have done with the Democratic Party and now with the young generation in the Republican Party as well. I saw some polls that are frightening. We cannot afford to play games with the U.S. strategic relations, which is a major pillar of our security, and the bipartisan support. We must jettison the divisive strategies of Netanyahu and others who decided to become the Jerusalem senator, the Jerusalem Republican senator. We have to get over that. Assuming we have elections between April and October of next year, I hope that the moment of change, coming back to our senses, real priorities, and remedying our relations in the region and globally.
What a fascinating
healing internal rifts.
Well, that's a suggestion, and more than a suggestion, that Israel's election next year is likely to be a watershed event, truly separating the events and the tone of recent years from what could come next. Nimrod Novik, thank you so very much. Again, well known, of course, as a longtime advisor to the late Prime Minister Shimon Peres. Also, you are on the executive board of Commanders for Israel Security and the Israel Fellow for IPF, the Israel Policy Forum. Thank you for joining me, speaking to us from Tel Aviv. Have a great evening.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye now. And indeed, our thanks to Nimrod Novik, who is a true expert on Israeli society and Israeli politics. Keep in mind that on the audio side, on the various podcast platforms, you can hear our weekly audio podcast, The Mossad Files. And one other reminder, if I may, one of the 5 books that I've written with Yossi Melman, an Israeli expert on all things having to do with intelligence and security, Spies Against Armageddon, Inside Israel's Secret Wars. I hope, you may find the book interesting. Until the next audio podcast from the Mossad Files, thank you very much. I'm Dan Raviv.